Welcome to the Move with Motus Podcast. My name is Dr. Christopher Ellis, and joining me is personal trainer John Williams. We are the owners of Motus Personal Training and Physiotherapy. Together, we will discuss any topic you can think of when it comes to training and rehab. From the carnivore diet to hip impingement, you can be sure that all your questions will be answered. Enjoy this week's episode.
I've been working out.
Uh-huh.
As you do. And I've been having some killer workouts recently.
Good.
Like, not only have they enjoyable, but they've also been very effective. It's been like the past 5 days. I've just been feeling good in the gym. And what I've been doing, because I was having a hard time motivating myself, and then I started working out with one of my friends, Elizabeth, and then coming back out of that, like the week I was moving, I just worked out once, and then now I've been back into it for the past few days. And what I've been doing is I've just been going to the gym. I don't have a plan, but obviously I think people they shouldn't necessarily follow this piece of it, not having a plan. But I've been going in, choosing either upper body or lower body, maybe deciding something specific, okay, I'm going to deadlift today, I'm going to squat today, I'm going to focus on posterior chain, I'm going to focus on my shoulders a little bit, some a little bit more focus on top of just upper body and lower body, but generalized upper body, lower body. I give myself an hour, and I have to be there for the whole hour, and I have to be working for the whole hour. And I do 1 minute rest periods, and I just do bodybuilding style workouts. And I feel over the past 5 days, I feel fantastic.
Wait, so what's different? Is it the fact that you have a training partner?
No, well, I don't have a training partner now. I did it before.
Gotcha.
But before, I was going in without that strict, I'm going to be here for exactly an hour and no less and no more. And then I save 8 minutes or so for stretching at the end. So once I'm at 52 minutes, I start stretching no matter what happens. And then the thing that's changed, just a very strict, exactly 1 minute rest period. And then you have to go to the next set, 4 sets of everything, and just move on to the next thing. Just this very, even though I don't go in with a plan, it's just this very rigid, structured, time component that has made me significantly more efficient. I do 2 circuits in the beginning, but then everything is just single exercises.
So 52 minutes with 1 minute break. So you're probably getting in a solid 26 minutes exercise.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. I like setting things up for time versus sets and reps. Well, the reps more, I feel if you set a number, say I want to get 15 in, maybe just those last 3 the form sucks, whereas if you set a timer for a minute and just say, I'm going to do this, these flies or whatever, perfect for every rep. And even if it's 4 reps, it's slow and controlled. I think that's better.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, obviously when we talk about what most people are trying to do 2 things. They're trying to lose body fat and they're trying to gain muscle mass. It's pretty simple. And then a lot of people are trying to get out of pain too, but general population, you see most people's complaints. I want to lose weight. I want to look better. So time under tension is your best friend, and the reps actually don't matter. Your body doesn't know that it did 15 reps. Your body knows that it worked for a period of time, and that's what's driving the fatigue.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I think that probably the 2 most important variables in my mind is, as you said, time under tension and going to fatigue or going to failure. I think is probably, if you're go in with just a very simple approach, I would say that would be it.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this because my workouts, I've done highly functional type workouts before. I've done a lot of strength training. I've done a lot of, speed and athletic work. And I've done a lot of bodybuilding stuff too. I'm thinking about this based on the way I'm doing my workouts now and the way I feel and the way I've been looking in the past few days. I think for most people, most of the time, a bodybuilding style type of training with perfect movement is probably the perfect regimen for most people. But the perfect movement piece is very important.
Yep.
Because if you don't have the perfect movement piece, then I would say the bodybuilding thing is not what you should be doing. Because they're simple movements, they're isolated to certain muscles. You have a couple compound things like your squats and your deadlifts. But you have to have the perfect movement there, and you probably have to do functional training before you can get to that point.
Okay, yeah, this word, functional. So there's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. What is that, first of all?
Yeah.
What's it mean to be functional? Because I see a lot of like bros on Instagram be like, oh, that's not functional. Like don't do bicep curls. It's not functional. It's like, don't you ever have to like lift anything, like carry something? That's very functional. What do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is a word, this big word too in the physical therapy realm, and it's like we have all these muscles on our body and they all serve a purpose, and therefore everything is functional, right? I mean, wrist
Yeah.
curls, are those
Functional
functional?
is a
Of course
better
it is.
word. What I should say is higher rep range training with stability work, and probably more integrated movements like doing a squat to a pull, doing a lunge to a pull, things where there's numerous things happening at the same time, where you have to integrate numerous different muscle groups versus just, okay, I'm just going to do a bench. Sure, it's 4 muscle groups, but they're all isolated to the same area. I'm not really tying in my upper body, my lower body.
Yeah, so it's sort of like it's trying to achieve multiple planes of motion. Is that the idea? Multiple joints?
Multiple planes of motion, and then also tying in the upper and lower bodies at the same time.
Yeah. Well, see, I think there's nothing wrong with, say you don't have, you get back pain with lifting something heavy. Okay. So that's basically a deadlift, right? So maybe your form's not that great at deadlift. So why not break down all the individual motions of a deadlift and then bring it all back together? So I think there's too much emphasis on just functional. Sometimes you have to teach somebody how to stabilize their core, for example. And I think that's totally functional, so that's just a word to me that gets tossed around a lot. And I'm not sure 100% like what that really means. I think all
No, I actually
muscles and
completely
all
agree with you.
movements, all muscles and all movements are functional.
No, and I mean, going back to your, like, have you ever had to lift something thing, speaking about the bicep curl, the single joint movement, but you probably do a bicep curl, probably just do straight elbow flexion more times in a day than you do anything else.
Yeah,
Like if I pick up my phone, like
yeah.
I didn't move any other muscles to do that. I just flexed my elbow. So
You got to feed yourself, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and actually, I read a study somewhere that there's more core work in a bicep curl than there is actually in a bicep. Like more muscle activity in your core, because
Really.
it's basically perturbation if you think about it. Now, I don't
One
know.
thing that people really mess up with a bicep curl is their posture. Your shoulders should be retracted, your pelvis should be neutral, your knee should be straight, your head should be pulled in. Like people do all sorts of things when they do bicep curls, and it's wild.
Yeah, well, so because most people are trying to lift too heavy, I think.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if your goal is to like isolate the bicep, then you gotta like be controlled, as you're kind of suggesting. But I always use the bicep curl as an example of how the body will find what it needs joint by joint. So if you're
Yep.
grabbing 50s and you can't handle 50s, well, you're going to probably end up shrugging your shoulders, the next joint being the shoulder.
Mhm.
If you still don't get enough tension from your shoulder shrug, you're probably going to sway your back. That's basically the next set of joints, your spine. Like I've even seen people, like the biologists keep going up and down the chain to find what needs to get the task done. Um, I've even seen people do like a little heel lift doing a bicep curl, you know, because they're just trying to handle too much weight.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, dude, grab some 25s. Just nice, like 3-second eccentric, nice slow on the way down, 10 reps. You're gonna be feeling that. You don't
Yeah.
need 40s.
Yep. Yeah, I think eccentrics are the way to go. Negatives, definitely.
Well, especially if you want to build muscle. Again, if we're talking time under tension. Now, what is your training regimen like now, and why is it that way? She's at the door right now, crying.
The
This
dog,
dog. Yes.
give her a treat.
I don't want to do anything for
See, you got my case about Bubba.
her.
Anyways, well, so right now it's a little bit different. So, like, the whole arc of my programming will change depending on how I'm doing. So, I have my sort of, I don't want to call it routine because routine sounds like I'm doing the same thing over and over. I have my method. And once that I sort of like kind of plateau or I stop seeing results or I'm just bored, I'll switch it up entirely. And then sometimes I get bored of all of my ideas, and then I'll hire a trainer. So actually, I'm working with a trainer right now. He's just doing online programming for me. That's all. So I'm doing probably what you'd consider like functional stuff. So I am doing like squats, overhead press, a lot of
Yep.
coplanar things. A little more like hit style training, which I typically don't even like, to be honest. But sometimes I need to do that to break a plateau.
Yep.
So let me show you. Let me kind of break down what I normally do. So first of all, I work out in my garage. I have a pretty sweet garage gym, and I have a couple whiteboards in there. I'll draw like a plus sign, a big, it's like four. I basically break the whiteboard out into four quadrants, and I'll write in those four quadrants: strength, cardio, core, mobility. And then I'll pick like a movement. I kind of focus it mostly on a movement. Say I want to do a squat day, right? So basically leg day, right? Um, I'll start off by filling out the strength quadrant. I'll do a bunch of things to warm up the legs first. Maybe I'll do some hip abduction, or maybe I'll do some hinging like a deadlift, or even some heel raises, anything to get some blood to the legs. And then I'll do a lot of emphasis on the squat. But probably even before that, I'll also fill out cardio, mobility, and core. So I basically make sure to achieve those four things in that day. So I'll probably start off with some cardio. That's going to sort of mimic with the movement I want to do. So squats, a lot of quad movement, a lot of leg. So maybe I'll start off with some jump rope, just enough to break a sweat. So when I say cardio, I'm just trying to really get the heart pumping and break a sweat. And then I'm going to probably do some sort of core stability work because I want to focus on a good neutral spine during my squat. And then I'll put in some mobility stuff too to match what I'm trying to do. So that usually means a lot of ankle work and some hip work because that's what you really need for a decent squat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I build out my daily program. And weekly, so I have a background in powerlifting, so I like the way we used to work out in the powerlifting. So it'd be like bench, squat, deadlift. So those are my big three movements I typically go for, and I'll break down everything in those quadrants just like I described in the squat day. That's my basic routine. 3 days on, 1 day off. 3 days on, 1 day off.
Now, has your trainer been switching that up at all?
Doing what?
Has your trainer been switching that up at all?
Yeah, totally. I don't think I'm benching at all right now. Which is funny too. That's another trend I've noticed over the years. It's like bench presses are leaving gyms. I feel like it's out of fashion in gyms these days, the bench press.
How do you feel about that?
It's just like I was saying before, it's still functional. I mean, you still need to push things. I think there's nothing wrong with bench pressing.
Yeah, and I think bench pressing is really important, especially if you should have, because the biggest limitation for people with benching is shoulder range of motion, but you should have the shoulder range of motion to do a bench press.
Yeah, I see. Okay, well, I agree with you, but what motion in particular are you talking about?
I'm talking about the horizontal abduction at the shoulder getting limited through pectoralis major and probably minor.
Okay, so pec stiffness limiting horizontal abduction. Yeah, I definitely see a lot of that. I see.
And let me describe what that is. So when you're going down in a bench, as your elbows are coming out wide, that is horizontal abduction. And that's the range of motion most people are missing. Like, even if you just try to do it right now and you try to see and you point your thumbs out to the side and you try to see where your thumbs go, they're probably not getting all the way to your chest. But then you put a bar on, that weight is just pushing you back down. That's probably going to cause some issues if you can't get your thumbs to your chest just in a standing posture as you try to bring your elbows towards your side or out to the side.
Yeah. One thing I see a lot is missing shoulder extension.
Yes.
So that will show up as a shoulder dumping forward. And I see that all the time. So if you're on your stomach, like prone, you should be able to bend your elbows by your rib and make a fist by your rib cage. It's probably hard to understand via audio. And then you should be able to lift. It's like picture you're on the floor. Lift your fists up at least a couple inches off the ground So think of like a rowing position. You should be you should be able to be on the floor face down and do a row, keeping those elbows bent, and your fingers and your fists should come off the ground at least a few inches, because that really is an expression of shoulder extension. If you think about what's going on with the humerus, a lot of people can't do that, and that turns into a compensation with the whole scapula doing like an anterior tilt and the humeral head pushing forward in front of the shoulder joint capsule. And that's a very tender area. There's a lot of nerves, blood vessels that pass through there. And the capsule itself can be really touchy.
Yeah, especially because your bench press is one of your heaviest lifts. So if you're having all that nefarious movement in such a heavy lift, you're really asking for problems.
Yeah. So that's one of the biggest holes I see in terms of like people getting anterior shoulder pain with bench pressing, or a lot of times I'll see that with doing dips as well. You get the kind of the same mechanism in dips, especially if you're doing like your hands are on a bench behind your back and you're doing those style dips.
Those are my least favorite ones. Those are terrible.
Yeah, because that requires a fair amount of end range. Well, first of all, a lot of shoulder extension, but also a lot of control in end range extension. So those are pretty difficult. And I'll see a lot of people like come out of the gates without, haven't worked out for years and trying to do that one because they used to do it back in the day, and then they fire up the shoulder. Oh, and the other compensation I see a lot and is that elbow flare, right? When you're going a little too heavy and those elbows aren't at a 45 and they start to kick up a little bit. So you get almost like they're basically at 90 degrees of abduction. So like that elbow flare, you know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. And that probably goes back to your point of missing that shoulder extension range of motion.
Maybe. I you know what I think that is really is the body trying to find stability. So you're probably handling a load that's a little too heavy for you. So when it comes to shoulder and hip, you're going to see this a lot. I know you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Like in squats, once you push a certain load that's a little too heavy for you, you're going to get that knee collapse. Well, that knee collapse is really hip internal rotation. You can kind of wind your capsule up into internal rotation, get sort of false sense of stability because you're just basically leaning on your own capsular ligaments. And the same thing happens at the shoulder, right? So that elbow flare is really what you're seeing is shoulder internal rotation. So that just means you're overloading basically. I see this a lot too with like reverse flies. You know how like the one on the machine where you put your chest against the thing and then it's usually like the pec deck, but you can turn it into reverse. I'll see there's like multiple handles. I always like the thumbs up position. I think it's way better on the shoulder.
Yes.
But many people will do that, the position where their palms are facing down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're just going into internal rotation and feeding all of their bad joint mechanics.
Well, they're like, oh, that feels easier to do. Well, yeah, because you just wound up your internal rotation ligaments, your capsule, basically. So you're finding a sort of false sense of stability in your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually avoid that position altogether.
So I like how you walk through in a little more specificity how you do your workouts and how you structure them. So I'm going to do the same because I think it would be valuable for the people listening at home. So my workouts, when we talk about a warm-up, my warm-up definitely looks a little bit different than other people's. It's an active, well, it's very similar to yours where you're trying to turn on certain muscles. I call it an activation. And sometimes I'll do multiple activation circuits. Sometimes I'll just do one, but usually it's a series of exercises that are pretty low intensity for myself personally. And also don't go through a giant range of motion and are also targeted for specific muscles that I really need to be ready to go for bigger things later on. So let's say I'm squatting that day. Well, I really need my glutes to be turned on. I really need those to be fired up. So I'm going to do some hip extensions, some like glute bridges. And I might even do like a lower intensity squat motion. I might do like a goblet squat with a lighter weight. As long as my hips are feeling good, my joints are feeling good that moment. For anything upper body, I'm trying to turn on my posterior chain right in between my shoulder blades as much as possible. So those are nice and stable for when I go to do some anterior stuff later on, or when I just go to do more posterior stuff later on. Yeah. So usually it's like 3 exercises, one thing for my core and my pelvis, one thing for posterior chain shoulders, and then maybe if I'm sticking with upper body right now, I'll do one thing for anterior chain, upper body. But typically I'll just keep it to the posterior chain before I get to that point. And then after that, either one or two activation circuits that are usually 3 exercises each, I'm going to do some sort of dynamic mobility to now loosen up those joints a little bit. But you want to do that mobility after you've already, turned on some muscles and gotten some blood flow going, or else you could either pull something, which I've done in the past, actually have some damage there. Or you're just not going to move well through the mobility because your muscles you have no neurological stimulus yet.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'll go into my dynamic mobility stuff. I might sprinkle in just a couple exercises there, depending on the focus. So it'll be some upper body stuff, some lower body stuff, depending on what the day is. And then I'll do my larger compound movements, my squats, my deads, my benches, however many I want to do. Maybe 2-3 large compound movements, 4 sets each. Again, I've been working with those minute-long intervals. I'll probably end up switching that up sometime later on, but I've been enjoying it now. And then after that is when I move on to more isolated movements, like your quote-unquote accessory, auxiliary movements. And then I might sprinkle in some integrated movements in there too. Like the other day, I started off doing some deadlifts. Then I went to some, barbell glute bridges. Then I did some leg presses. And then after that, I went and I did some like lunges to a pull with the cable, just to get a little bit of integrated movements in there as well. And then I finish it off with those 8 minutes of static stretching.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a good program. 2 things that I thought of while you're talking that I wanted to mention is, first of all, the sort of anterior chain dominance that I see constantly, especially with the upper body, sometimes lower body too, but especially for, guys like me that do a lot of bench pressing. So you'll see just this overbearance, and especially in the shoulder joint, of just like stiff pec from so much benching, pulling you forward. So you gotta, you have to program in a lot of pulling, as I would say as much, or maybe even overcompensate if you're having a lot of rounding at the shoulders. They overcompensate and do more pulling until you kind of balance back out. Because that creates a lot of shoulder issues and spine issues. So that's just a pattern I see constantly. And
yeah, I mean, mine is my approach. I usually go like 2-to-1, if not even 3-to-1, like posterior chain to anterior chain. So like rows over pushing. That's kind of like where I play, because I still need a lot of stability and strength in that section. I still need to work on my posture as well personally. And I don't really care about having the biggest bench in the world. There was a point in time where I was benching like 275 for like a couple, and that wasn't really all that hard. But I also had the worst shoulder pain of my entire life at that same time. Now I have probably the least amount of shoulder pain I've ever had, even though my bench press is like, god awful.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys I'll see that can, they can bench 300, but you hand them like little pink 5-pound weights and have them doing some, prone on a ball, horizontal abduction, or cable pulls, what do you call those? Like a pull apart motion.
Yeah.
And they can't even handle that weight, for like 10 reps. So I'm not saying it should be a 1-to-1 ratio, but, I think the further you stray from symmetry, the greater the chances are of, shoulder pain and some other issues that arise.
Yeah. And you got to think your whole posterior chain is supposed to be holding you up.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be putting you in good positions. So if you're not training that as frequently as your anterior chain, you're really leaving yourself up for injury.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see this all the time, especially the glutes, right? I mean, probably the number one source of low back pain is weak glutes.
Yes.
So the other thing I wanted to mention too was the importance of building unilateral training into your programming. So in other words, doing stuff on one leg or one arm. Because you can hide a lot of weaknesses or poor movements or lacking of range of motion by doing everything bilateral, by doing only squats or only deadlifts or only push-ups. If you don't expose one limb to motion, you get to hide stuff. So that's one of the things I do as a therapist is I get people let's see what your single leg squat looks like. And they might squat perfect. And then you get them on the right leg, they do well. You get them on the left leg, everything falls apart. And that really exposes some, holes in their game.
Yes, and I should say this about those activation circuits I do. They are primarily, if not exclusively, unilateral.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't even grab a barbell because I don't want any sort of, bilateral compensations. I want to know where everything is. So it's dumbbells, it's on one leg, it's using one arm. If I'm going to do some sort of pressing motion, like the other day, I did a dying bug variation with a press. So I was pressing in like a dying bug type position where I had one leg straight, the other leg bent. Just because I'm trying to feel out, hey, where are the little weaknesses? Where's the little instability coming from? And right to left side, there was huge amounts of differences going on. I was losing a ton of strength just in pelvic positioning and core strength in my pressing motion from the left leg, the left arm to the right arm. So you find those little weaknesses in those little strength gaps, in those little strength leakages when you go on one arm, one leg, and try to decrease the stability a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Another point I want to bring up too is the whole idea of form and quality of movement. Now, I do want to be clear that I think it's okay to squat and then maybe your knee caves in a little bit. I think there's the ideal way to move, whatever that may be. But then the further you move away from ideal, I think the greater the chances of, first of all, not training the muscle you want to train, and secondarily, then potential injury or, onset of pain. So I think, I think the body's super capable of doing lots of things. Like I always bring up the Jefferson curl. People freak out about that movement. That's basically picking something off the ground, but rounding your back. I think the body is capable of doing the thing if you progressively load it and, basically build the tolerance to that position. So, ideal movement, I don't even really know what that is. I guess that's being as neutral as possible. I think that's probably the safest way to move if you're not prepared to do something. You know what I mean? So if you can only deadlift maybe 200 pounds, and then you have to, like I had to do, unload an entire truck full of ceramic tiles, each box weighing at least 80 pounds, and I had to unload like probably 200 boxes. Well, I was very careful to be as neutral as possible and robotic in my movement because I just know that was a lot of load for me personally to handle. Now, if I had a big, deadlift of say 500 pounds and I was doing it all the time, I'd feel a lot more comfortable moving that way and not having to be as perfect in my movement.
Yeah, and I was picking up a mattress the other day, and I was actually pulling out of your truck, and I was pulling the mattress out, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'll just try to lift this thing by myself. I was with like my friend at the time, and she didn't need to lift the mattress out of the truck. I was like, I'll just figure this out, and I like pull it out of the truck on top of my head, and I look down at my knees, and both my knees are like internally rotated a little bit and adducted. I was like, I just looked down. I just like turned them out, but I was like, oh, it didn't cause any pain, didn't cause any damage from me in that position. That was just the position that my body found in that moment to do the thing I was trying to do.
Yeah.
But when you're strong and capable in numerous different positions, numerous different planes of movement, you can find yourself in what you would think is a bad position and have no pain, have no injury, because your body's strong everywhere.
Agreed. Change of topic. CrossFit. What are your thoughts on CrossFit?
Yeah, you better know what the fuck you're doing. If you're gonna go into one of those gyms, guys like you and I don't mean to get like cocky or we can do it. General population is gonna have a much harder time. Those coaches are not paying attention, and those workouts are not written with improper mechanics in mind, which everybody has most of the time. So that's kind of where I stand, but they have a fantastic culture. Like I thought about joining one when I moved back up here to Massachusetts, simply because I wanted a sense of community. I wanted to be able to work out hard in the gym. I knew those workouts were going to push me hard, and I know what I'm doing. So I'll be very capable. I'm going to be able to get out of there without any injury. But go into one of those gyms and ask around how many people have like knee pain and shoulder pain. It's a lot. I've trained in those gyms my whole life. The amount of injuries is startling, and there's a reason for it.
Yeah, and I got a little bit of mixed thoughts on that. So first of all, I'll say that there's just like any other profession, good coaches and bad coaches, right? So
Yep.
I think there are some great coaches in CrossFit. So let's start there. Um, and then I think quality movement does matter because you're in. This is a sport where you're pushing the envelope. You're exposing a lot of end range. You're exposing a lot of weakness. So it's going to naturally come with some injury, which I think is okay. Um, there's this great quote that this reminds me of. It's the ship is safe at harbor, but that's not what it's meant to do, right? So you could sit on the couch your whole life and not really have pain, but as soon as you expose yourself to some complicated movements or heavy movements, that's what your body is supposed to do, and you should train up to be able to do those things. But you're going to probably, some pain is going to come along with it, and I think that's kind of normal.
I think aches and pains and discomfort are okay. I think actual injury is not okay. And you see a lot of actual injury, actual like ligament tears in CrossFit for people who aren't even competing.
Yeah. Well, so, I would say that pain like precedes tissue damage. You know what I mean? So you got to pay attention. Your body's giving you warning signals if you're starting to have pain. And if you keep pushing through it, then you're going to probably get some damage, some actual tissue damage. The other thing too, I would say, I've never done CrossFit. I'm actually about to go to my first class tomorrow. I'm excited. But I do think that the emphasis on like AMRAP, as many rounds as possible, that's where what you were saying, you better know how to move. I think that's where that counts. Because if you're just so function driven, you're gonna do that snatch as any way possible as many times as you can. And now you're talking big time movement compensation, loss of good form under heavy load with speed. Now you're throwing in metabolic demand, right? So fatigue sits in fast, and then that's where I think things start to unravel.
Last thing I'll say, then I got to jump off. I was at a CrossFit class, the last CrossFit class I went to, and I don't have the best ankle mobility, but honestly, I could probably do it a lot better now because my ankle mobility is a lot better.
I forced you to do that.
What's that?
Because I forced you to do that.
Yeah, through absolute, just berating me with insults.
Yeah, embarrassing you.
But I went to a CrossFit class and we had to do 50 squats. It was just like 50 squats, as many as you could. I don't know. It was some time-based thing, and you had to do a whole bunch of squats. Then you had to do them fast. And so I go to do the squats, and I'm squatting to parallel. Like I'm squatting so that my thigh is parallel to the ground. And the squats look good. Like the guy videoed him because he was being all critical of me. And he was like, "Hey man, you got to go lower. You got to go lower." I'm like, if I go any lower, and I went lower, and I showed him, I was like, my whole lower back is rounding here. Like I'm in deep lumbar flexion. So I'm not going to do that. He's like, "No man, you look fine. Like you can do it." I'm like, dude, these are high volume squats you're talking about. This is 50 squats, and we're doing this over and over again. We're doing this 3 or 4 times. I'm not going to go into that position 50 times. I don't think it's bad once, like your Jefferson curl conversation.
Yeah.
But high speed, high rep, high intensity, you don't want to be in bad positions. And this guy was asking me over and over again to go into a bad position. Yeah. And I just see those sorts of things so often in CrossFit gyms.
Yeah, that's where I would personally modify. If you're trying to get that, going for a function like that, like 50 times or whatever, maybe you got to elevate the heels a little bit just to get you in a better position, just to get that task done.
But even at that guy should have realized, like, dude, he's squatting to parallel. He's fine.
Yeah.
Like that's a perfectly deep squat.
Yeah.
For what we're trying to accomplish. Any lower, he should be able to see that movement and know that. And those are the things that sort of worry me about CrossFit is just that lack of information. But hey, I got to jump off. Right. I'm going on another Zoom call right now.
Okay, Mr. Important.
I'm a busy guy, very, very popular these days.
I know. All right. Well, you go. I won't keep you, and we'll chat soon. Do you have unexplained pain? Or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great way to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's liver function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It's sent to you with free shipping, and you get results in 2 to 5 days, no physician referral needed. Use the code DPT20 for 20% off. Go to letsgetchecked.com and use the code DPT20. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions you want answered, find us on Instagram at Motus Naples or send us an email. You can fill out a contact form on our website, which is motusnaples.com. Make sure to check out our blog and our shop as well, where there are downloadable programs that we'll continue to update. This is the Move with Motus podcast. We'll see you next week.